The notification chimed softly on my phone at exactly 2:17 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon in late May. Sophia had just spoken her very first word, clear as daylight, while we sat together on the living room carpet of our small Tempe apartment. Not mama or dada like most babies, but light as she pointed her tiny finger toward the afternoon sun streaming through our window. My heart practically burst as I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking with excitement as I recorded her saying it again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Without thinking twice, I sent the video to our family group chat with a message that felt like pure joy. Sophia's first word, she said light. I included Patricia, my mother-in-law, Daniel's brother Marcus and his wife Jessica, and my own parents. This was the moment every new parent dreams of sharing, the milestone that makes all those sleepless nights worth it. The responses came quickly. My parents were over the moon, sending heart emojis and exclamation points. Marcus replied with a simple cool, Jessica added a smiley face. Daniel, still at school teaching his third-grade class, wouldn't see it for another hour. Then Patricia's response appeared. 3 words that felt like ice water thrown across my celebration. Don't care honestly. I stared at those words until they blurred. Don't care honestly. About her granddaughter's first word. About this precious moment I'd wanted to share with family. The woman who'd spent the last 8 months comparing Sofia unfavorably to her other grandson Aiden, at every opportunity had just dismissed the most important developmental milestone of my daughter's young life. The thing about becoming a mother is that it changes your relationship with everyone around you, especially your in-laws. When Daniel and I first got married 3 years ago, I thought Patricia and I would eventually find our rhythm. She'd been polite enough during our engagement, though I could sense her disappointment that her son wasn't marrying someone from their social circle in Scottsdale. Daniel had been adopted when he was 5, something Patricia rarely mentioned, but that seemed to color every interaction she had with our little family. Marcus, her biological son, had married Jessica 2 years before us, and their wedding had been the kind of elaborate affair that Patricia loved to reference. 500 guests, a venue in Paradise Valley, photographers whose names she dropped at every family gathering. When Daniel and I had our simple ceremony at a community center in Phoenix with 50 close friends and family, Patricia had spent the entire reception making subtle comments about how intimate everything was. But it was when the grandchildren arrived that the real differences became obvious. Marcus and Jessica's son Aiden was born just 6 months before Sofia, and from the moment he entered the world, Patricia treated him like he'd been specially delivered from heaven. She babysat him twice a week, took him on shopping trips to buy clothes that cost more than our monthly grocery budget, and documented every burp and giggle on her social media accounts like he was performing miracles. When Sofia was born, Patricia's enthusiasm was noticeably different. She visited exactly once in the hospital, stayed for 20 minutes, and spent most of that time on her phone. She never offered to babysit, never brought gifts unless it was a major holiday, and rarely asked about Sofia's development or milestones. When I'd mentioned something cute Sofia had done, Patricia would immediately counter with something Aiden was doing that was apparently more advanced or impressive. Last month at Marcus's birthday party, Patricia had set up an elaborate photo shoot for Aiden's first steps, complete with professional lighting and multiple costume changes. When I mentioned that Sofia was also starting to cruise along furniture, Patricia had nodded absently and asked Jessica about Aiden's latest swimming lessons. The favoritism wasn't even subtle anymore. So when Sofia said her first word that Thursday afternoon, my excitement was mixed with a familiar anxiety. Would Patricia care? Would she ask to see the video again? Would she share in this moment that felt so monumentally important to me? I'd actually rehearsed in my head how I'd described the way Sofia had looked up at the light fixture and connected the word to the object, showing the kind of cognitive development that my background as a speech therapist told me was significant. Instead, I got 3 words that felt like a slap across the face. I sat on our carpet holding Sofia, who was still babbling happily and pointing at various objects around the room, trying to process the casual cruelty of Patricia's response. This was her granddaughter. This was a milestone that grandparents typically treasure, document, and celebrate. My own parents had already called to hear Sofia say the word over FaceTime, tears in their eyes as they praised her intelligence and development. But Patricia couldn't even muster fake enthusiasm. She couldn't pretend to care about this moment that meant everything to me. The honesty of her response was almost more hurtful than if she'd ignored the message entirely. At least silence would have given me room to imagine she was busy or hadn't seen the text. Instead, she'd deliberately chosen to let me know that my daughter's achievements simply didn't matter to her. Daniel came home that evening to find me still upset, though I'd tried to hide it. He had that excited energy that teachers get when they've had a particularly good day with their students, and I didn't want to ruin his mood with family drama. But when he asked about my day and I showed him the group chat exchange, his face fell in a way that told me this wasn't the first time he'd noticed his mother's differential treatment. "She's been like this since I was adopted," he said quietly, scrolling through the messages. "Marcus gets the full version of her love, and everyone else gets whatever's left over. I just hoped it would be different with the grandkids." We talked about it over dinner, while Sofia sat in her high chair periodically saying light and pointing at the ceiling fixture, completely unaware that her grandmother had just dismissed one of the most important moments of her development. Daniel suggested we just focus on the family members who did.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Care, who were excited about Sofia's progress, who wanted to be part of her life in meaningful ways. But something about Patricia's response had shifted something inside me. Maybe it was the postpartum hormones, or maybe it was just the accumulated weight of 8 months of watching my daughter be treated as secondary to her cousin. Whatever it was, I found myself opening TikTok that night after Sofia was asleep. I'd been lurking on the platform for months, watching other parents share their experiences and finding comfort in the knowledge that parenthood was challenging for everyone. I'd never posted anything myself, but something about that day made me want to document what had happened. Not for revenge exactly, but because I needed to put this experience somewhere outside of my own head. I uploaded the video of Sofia saying her first word, then screen recorded the group chat exchange, carefully blurring out phone numbers and last names but leaving the messages visible. I wrote a caption that felt honest and raw: "When your baby says their first word and you're so excited to share it with family, but your mother-in-law reminds you exactly where you stand. Some grandparents just hit different, I guess." I tagged it with hashtags about first words, family drama, and grandparent relationships, then put my phone away and tried to forget about it. It felt like shouting into the void, but sometimes the void is the only place safe enough to express your real feelings. I woke up the next morning to 47 notifications. The video had been viewed over 2,000 times overnight. Comments were pouring in from other parents sharing similar experiences with dismissive in-laws, grandparents who played favorites, and family members who couldn't be bothered to celebrate important milestones. But it wasn't just commiseration. People were genuinely outraged on Sofia's behalf. "That baby deserves a grandmother who celebrates her," wrote one user. "The way she says light is absolutely precious, and any grandparent should be over the moon about this milestone." Another comment read, "I'm a grandmother myself, and I cannot imagine responding this way to any grandchild's first word. This breaks my heart." By noon the video had reached 50,000 views. By evening it was approaching 200,000. The comments section had become a support group for people who'd experienced similar family dynamics, with grandparents, parents, and even adult children sharing their own stories of favoritism and dismissal. But it wasn't just the view count that was growing. People were sharing the video to their own accounts, adding their own commentary about family dynamics and the importance of celebrating all children equally. Parenting influencers with hundreds of thousands of followers were duetting the video, using it as a jumping-off point for conversations about toxic grandparent behaviors and setting boundaries with family members who played favorites. The local news picked it up on Saturday morning. A reporter called our apartment, wanting to interview us about the viral video and the conversation it had started about modern family dynamics. Daniel and I agreed to speak with them, partly because we felt like the story had taken on a life of its own, and we wanted some control over how it was told. The news segment aired that evening, featuring clips from the original video, along with expert commentary from family therapists about the impact of grandparent favoritism on family relationships. They interviewed several local families who'd experienced similar dynamics, and the story resonated with viewers across the Phoenix metro area. By Sunday morning, the video had reached over 1 million views. My phone was buzzing constantly with interview requests, collaboration offers from brands, and messages from people around the world sharing their own experiences. The hashtag #MLDrama had started trending, with thousands of people sharing their own stories about difficult mother-in-law relationships. But the most significant change wasn't happening online. It was happening in our family group chat, which had been suspiciously quiet since Thursday afternoon. Marcus had texted privately to ask if I was okay, and my parents had called multiple times to check in and express their disbelief at how the story had exploded across social media. Patricia, however, had been completely silent. Until Monday morning, when Daniel's phone rang while he was getting ready for school. It was his mother, and even from across the room, I could hear the tightly controlled anger in her voice. She wanted to meet with us immediately to discuss what she called this social media situation and its impact on the family's reputation. Daniel suggested we meet at a neutral location, and Patricia agreed to come to the community center near our apartment that evening. When we arrived with Sofia in her stroller, Patricia was already there, sitting stiffly in one of the plastic chairs with her purse clutched in her lap like armor. She looked older than I'd ever seen her, and for a moment I felt a flash of guilt about how public this had all become. But then I remembered the casualness of her dismissal, the way she'd made me feel like my daughter's milestone was an inconvenience she couldn't be bothered to acknowledge. I don't understand why you felt the need to air our private family business online. Patricia began before we'd even sat down. Do you have any idea how this has affected me? My friends have been sending me this video, asking if I'm the grandmother in question. I've been humiliated. Daniel started to respond, but Patricia continued. And over what? A text message that you took completely out of context. I was having a busy day, and I didn't have time to write a longer response. That doesn't mean I don't care about Sofia. I looked at her carefully, this woman who'd spent 8 months making it clear that my daughter would always be secondary to her other grandchild, and realized that even now, even with the weight of public opinion against her, she couldn't bring herself to simply apologize or acknowledge that her response had been hurtful. Patricia, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, it wasn't just one text message. It's been 8 months of watching you treat Sofia differently than Aiden. 8 months of feeling like our family doesn't matter as much to you. That text was just the moment when I couldn't pretend anymore that it didn't hurt. Patricia's face flushed. I treat both grandchildren equally. If you feel otherwise, that's your perception, not reality. But something had changed in me over the past few days. Maybe it was reading hundreds of comments from other parents who'd experienced similar treatment, or maybe it was seeing how many people thought Patricia's response was genuinely awful. Whatever it was, I found myself speaking with a clarity I'd never had before. Patricia, last month you organized a professional photo shoot for Aiden's first steps. When Sofia started cruising, you didn't even ask to see a video. You've never offered to babysit Sofia, but you watch Aiden twice a week. You buy him clothes and toys constantly, but you've never brought Sofia a gift unless it was her birthday or Christmas. And when she said her first word, something that any loving grandparent would celebrate, you couldn't even manage fake enthusiasm. The community center was quiet, except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Patricia sat in silence for a long moment, and I could see her calculating whether to continue denying the obvious or finally acknowledge what everyone else could see. I never intended to hurt anyone, she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. If I've seemed more connected to Aiden, it's because Marcus and Jessica live closer, and I see him more often. It was a weak excuse, and we all knew it. Marcus and Jessica lived 15 minutes away from us, and Patricia had chosen to be more involved in their lives because she preferred their lifestyle, their income level, their social status. The proximity was just a convenient justification. Daniel finally spoke. Mom, we're not asking you to love Sofia more than Aiden, we're asking you to treat them both like they matter to you. Like their milestones are worth celebrating. Like they're both your grandchildren instead of one being your grandchild, and the other being an obligation. Patricia's composure cracked slightly. I don't know what you want from me, I can't undo a text message. We want you to try, I said. We want you to show up for Sofia the way you show up for Aiden. Not because a video went viral and you're embarrassed, but because she's your granddaughter, and she deserves a grandmother who's excited about her life. The meeting ended without resolution. Patricia said she needed time to think, gathered her purse, and left without saying goodbye to Sofia, who'd been babbling happily in her stroller throughout the entire conversation. But the conversation had accomplished something important for me. I'd finally said out loud what I'd been feeling for months, and I'd done it without apologizing for my own feelings, or making excuses for Patricia's behavior. The viral video had given me a platform to speak my truth, but more importantly, it had given me the confidence to advocate for my daughter in person. The video continued to circulate for weeks, eventually reaching over 5 million views and sparking hundreds of response videos from other parents sharing their own family stories. I started receiving messages from family therapists who wanted to use the video as a teaching tool, and from grandparents who said it had made them reflect on their own relationships with their grandchildren. 3 weeks after that community center meeting, Patricia called and asked if she could take Sofia to the park. It was a small gesture, but it was the first time she'd ever initiated one-on-one time with my daughter. When she brought Sofia home, she stayed for coffee and asked genuine questions about Sofia's development, her sleep schedule, and her favorite toys. It wasn't a complete transformation. Patricia still favored Aiden in obvious ways, and I doubted that would ever completely change. But something had shifted. Maybe it was the public scrutiny, or maybe it was finally being forced to confront the impact of her behavior. Whatever it was, she began making more effort to include Sofia in family activities, and to acknowledge her milestones. The viral video had done something I'd never expected. It hadn't just given me a platform to express my frustration. It had forced a conversation that our family needed to have, even if it took public embarrassment to make it happen. Sometimes the truth needs witnesses to have power, and social media had provided more witnesses than I'd ever imagined possible. 6 months later, Sofia is walking, saying dozens of words, and developing her own personality that makes everyone around her smile. Patricia still isn't the grandmother I'd hoped for, but she's trying harder to be present in Sofia's life. And I've learned that sometimes standing up for your child means speaking uncomfortable truths, even when the people who need to hear them don't want to listen. The video taught me that there are thousands of parents out there navigating similar family dynamics, feeling alone in their frustration with relatives who play favorites or dismiss their children's achievements. Sometimes sharing your story is the first step toward changing the dynamic, and sometimes it takes a village of strangers on the internet to remind you that your feelings are valid and your child deserves better. Most importantly, it taught me that my daughter's milestones are worth celebrating, regardless of who else thinks they matter. Every word she says, every step she takes, every moment of growth and discovery deserves to be acknowledged and treasured. And if the people who should care the most can't be bothered to show up, there's an entire world of people who will celebrate with you instead. The aftermath of going viral feels different than you imagine it would. 3 days after posting that TikTok, I found myself sitting in our tiny kitchen at 6 in the morning, scrolling through thousands of comments, while Sofia slept peacefully in her crib.
Ooh.
The numbers kept climbing in ways that felt surreal. 2 million views. 4 million. Comments from people in countries I'd never visited, sharing stories that mirrored my own experience with Patricia. But it was the private messages that hit hardest. A woman from Michigan wrote about her mother-in-law, who'd never acknowledged her son's autism diagnosis, but threw elaborate parties for his neurotypical cousin. A father from Texas shared screenshots of his own family group chat, where his mother had responded to news of his daughter's first soccer goal with OK, while posting paragraphs about his brother's child making honor roll. The stories kept coming, each one a variation on the same theme of grandparents who couldn't hide their preferences, parents who felt powerless to change family dynamics they'd never chosen. Daniel had stopped checking the comments after the first day. He said reading strangers' opinions about his mother made him feel sick, even when those opinions validated what we'd both known for months. He was caught between loyalty to the woman who'd raised him and protection of the family we'd built together. I understood his conflict, but I also felt a strange sense of relief that our experience was finally visible to the outside world. The video had taken on a life completely separate from our actual circumstances. News outlets were reaching out daily. A daytime talk show wanted us to appear alongside a family therapist to discuss multi-generational relationships. A podcast about modern parenting asked if I'd be willing to share more details about the favoritism we'd experienced. Each request felt simultaneously validating and overwhelming. What surprised me most was how many grandparents were commenting in support of Sofia rather than defending Patricia. Women in their 60s and 70s were writing lengthy responses about how they'd learned to love each grandchild individually, how they made sure to celebrate every milestone equally, how they couldn't imagine dismissing such an important moment in any child's development. Their voices carried weight that mine couldn't, legitimizing feelings I'd been questioning for months. Patricia's silence during this period was deafening. She hadn't responded to any texts, hadn't called Daniel, hadn't acknowledged the video's existence, despite the fact that several of her friends had clearly seen it. Marcus texted Daniel privately to say their mother was upset about the situation, but didn't elaborate on what that meant, or whether she planned to address it directly. The strangest part was watching Sofia continue her normal development, while chaos swirled around her first word. She'd moved on to saying book, and more, and up, blissfully unaware that her initial milestone had sparked conversations about family dynamics across multiple continents. She'd point at lights and say her word with the same excitement as always.
Lollies.
Completely innocent of the drama it had created. My own parents called every day during that first week, oscillating between pride that I'd found my voice and concern about the long-term impact on family relationships. My mother, Linda, had never particularly liked Patricia, but had always encouraged me to keep trying for Daniel's sake. Now she was questioning whether that advice had been fair to me or to Sofia. "I've been thinking about this for days," Linda said, during one of our evening phone calls. "You've been so focused on making everyone else comfortable that you forgot to protect your own child's dignity." That video wasn't revenge, it was documentation. Her words stayed with me as I tried to process what the viral response meant for our family moving forward. People kept asking in comments and interviews whether I regretted posting the video, whether I thought it had gone too far, whether I felt guilty about the public attention. The honest answer was complicated. I regretted that it had taken public humiliation to force a conversation that should have happened privately months ago. I regretted that Sofia's first word would forever be associated with family conflict, rather than pure celebration. But I didn't regret finally speaking the truth about what we'd been experiencing. I didn't regret giving voice to the hundreds of parents who messaged me to say they'd felt alone in similar situations. I didn't regret showing Patricia that her behavior had consequences, even if those consequences were more public than I'd anticipated. The breaking point came exactly 1 week after the video posted. Daniel and I were having dinner when his phone rang with Patricia's number. She'd been silent for 7 days, while the internet dissected her text message and found her wanting, and now she was ready to talk. Daniel put the call on speaker, and her voice filled our small dining room with barely controlled fury. "I hope you're satisfied," she began, without preamble. "I've had to deal with friends calling me, neighbors asking questions, people at the grocery store recognizing me from that news segment. You've humiliated me publicly over a private family matter, and I want to know what you plan to do about it." The entitlement in her voice was breathtaking. She'd spent months making my daughter feel secondary to her cousin, had dismissed Sofia's first word with casual cruelty, and now, she was demanding accountability from us for her own behavior becoming public knowledge. Daniel's response surprised me with its firmness. "Mom, Emma didn't humiliate you, your own words did that. She just shared what actually happened." A text message taken completely out of context, Patricia snapped. "I was busy that day, I didn't have time to write a proper response." "That doesn't make me a terrible grandmother." "It wasn't just that text," I interjected, finding my voice. "Patricia, you've made it clear since Sofia was born that she doesn't matter to you the way Aiden does." The text was just the moment I couldn't pretend that was okay anymore. "I treat both children equally," she insisted, but even she seemed to hear how hollow that sounded. "If you perceive favoritism, that's your issue, not mine." The conversation went in circles for 20 minutes. Patricia alternated between denying the obvious favoritism and justifying it with reasons that contradicted each other. She was too busy to properly acknowledge Sofia's milestones, but somehow had time to document every moment of Aiden's development. She lived closer to Marcus and Jessica, but had never made effort to visit us more frequently. She claimed to love both grandchildren equally, while providing detailed explanations for why one relationship was more convenient than the other. What became clear was that Patricia had called not to apologize or acknowledge her behavior, but to demand that we somehow undo the public attention her actions had received. She wanted us to post a follow-up video, explaining that she'd been misunderstood, to do interviews, clarifying that she wasn't actually a bad grandmother, to take responsibility for the consequences of her own choices. "I'm not doing that," I said, when she finally made her request explicit. "I'm not going to lie to protect you from the reaction to your own behavior. You wrote those words. You sent that message. You've made those choices for months. I'm not responsible for how the world responded to seeing them." The call ended with Patricia hanging up abruptly, leaving Daniel and me sitting in our kitchen with the weight of a relationship that might be permanently altered. He looked exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness, and I felt guilty for putting him in a position where he had to choose between supporting his wife and child and maintaining peace with his mother. But something had changed in me during that conversation. For months I'd been trying to manage Patricia's feelings, to excuse her behavior, to find ways to make our family dynamic work despite her obvious preferences. The viral video had shown me that I wasn't alone in thinking her treatment of Sofia was unacceptable, and that validation had given me strength I didn't know I possessed. The public response continued growing throughout that second week. The video had been shared across platforms, generating response videos from family therapists, parenting experts, and other content creators, who used our situation as a launching point for broader discussions about family dynamics. The hashtag grandparent favoritism started trending, with thousands of people sharing their own experiences of unequal treatment within extended families. Local news stations picked up the story, framing it as a conversation starter about modern family relationships and the role of social media in addressing private conflicts. I agreed to a few interviews, partly because I wanted some control over how our story was being told, and partly because the messages from other parents had convinced me that this conversation needed to happen publicly. During one television interview, the host asked whether I thought social media was the appropriate place to handle family disputes. It was a question I'd been grappling with privately, and my answer surprised even me.
Was handling a family dispute, I said. I think I was documenting a pattern of behavior that had been hurting my daughter for months. Sometimes things need to be witnessed to be taken seriously. My mother-in-law dismissed my concerns when I raised them privately, but she couldn't dismiss the response from thousands of other parents who recognized what I was describing. The interviewer pressed further, asking whether I'd considered the impact on family relationships. Of course I did, I replied. But I also had to consider the impact on my daughter of watching her grandmother treat her as less important than her cousin. At some point, protecting family peace becomes complicity in behavior that's harmful to your child. That interview clip went viral on its own, shared by parenting accounts and family advocacy organizations as an example of setting boundaries with difficult relatives. The response was overwhelmingly supportive, with viewers praising my willingness to prioritize Sofia's well-being over family harmony. But the success of the video also brought unexpected challenges. My personal social media accounts were suddenly flooded with followers, most supportive but some critical. I received collaboration offers from brands wanting to capitalize on my newfound platform, book agents asking if I'd consider writing about family dynamics, and speaking requests from parenting organizations. The attention felt simultaneously validating and invasive. I'd posted a 30-second video out of frustration and hurt, not because I wanted to become a spokesperson for family dysfunction. Yet here I was, fielding interview requests and brand partnerships while trying to maintain some semblance of normal life with a 10-month-old baby. Daniel struggled more visibly with the public nature of our family conflict. He'd grown up avoiding confrontation, trying to maintain peace between his adoptive status and his mother's obvious preference for Marcus. The viral video had made private family dynamics impossible to ignore, forcing conversations he'd spent years avoiding. I keep thinking about all the times I made excuses for her, he told me one evening while we watched Sofia play with her blocks. All the times I told myself she just expressed love differently, or that I was being too sensitive about the way she treated our family compared to Marcus's. Seeing thousands of strangers validate what you've been saying makes me realize how much I was gaslighting myself. The video had given him permission to acknowledge what he'd been minimizing for years. Patricia's favoritism wasn't subtle or debatable. It was obvious enough that strangers on the internet could identify it from a single text exchange. That recognition was liberating and painful in equal measure. Meanwhile, Sofia continued developing at her own pace, completely unaware that her first word had sparked a global conversation about family dynamics. She was pulling herself up to stand, cruising along furniture, and adding new words to her vocabulary weekly. Her joy and curiosity remained unchanged by the drama surrounding her, a reminder that children's development continues regardless of adult conflicts. The most meaningful responses to the video came from other parents who shared their own strategies for handling similar situations. Some had established firm boundaries with grandparents who played favorites, making it clear that unequal treatment wasn't acceptable. Others had chosen to limit contact with relatives who couldn't treat their children fairly. A few had successfully confronted family members about favoritism and seen genuine change in behavior. These stories gave me hope that our situation wasn't permanently broken, even if it was currently strained. They also reinforced my growing conviction that protecting Sofia from unequal treatment was worth the temporary discomfort of family conflict. 2 weeks after the video posted, I made a decision that surprised even me. I created a follow-up video, not to defend Patricia or walk back my original statement, but to share what I'd learned from the response. I talked about the importance of advocating for your children even when it's uncomfortable, about the difference between family loyalty and enabling harmful behavior, and about the power of speaking truth even when others prefer silence. A lot of people have asked if I regret posting that original video, I said, looking directly into my phone camera while Sofia babbled in the background. The only thing I regret is that it took going viral for my daughter's grandmother to consider that her behavior might need to change. Children deserve adults who celebrate their milestones, who treat them with equal love and attention, who make them feel valued for who they are rather than compared to who they're not. The follow-up video received over 1 million views within 24 hours, generating even more discussion about family boundaries and child advocacy. Comments poured in from viewers who appreciated the nuanced take on a situation that could have easily been presented as simple family drama. But more importantly, the video caught Patricia's attention in a way that our private conversations hadn't. 3 days after I posted the follow-up, Daniel received a text from his mother asking if she could come meet Sofia at a nearby park. It was the first time she'd ever initiated one-on-one time with our daughter, and while I was skeptical of her motivations, I agreed to the meeting. Watching Patricia interact with Sofia that afternoon revealed both how much potential existed for a genuine relationship and how much work would be required to build one. She was awkward and uncertain, clearly uncomfortable with the unstructured nature of playground time. She kept looking around as if she expected photographers or other parents to recognize her from the viral video. But she also asked Sofia's current words, listened when I explained her favorite activities, and spent genuine time watching her granddaughter explore the playground equipment. It wasn't the natural, easy interaction she had with Aiden, but it was effort in a way I'd never seen before. The viral video hadn't magically transformed Patricia into the grandmother I'd hoped for, but it had forced her to confront the reality that her behavior had consequences. Whether those consequences would lead to lasting change remained to be seen, but for the first time since Sofia's birth, I felt like our family dynamic might be negotiable rather than fixed. As we packed up to leave the park that day, Patricia made an observation that surprised me. "She's very curious," she said, watching Sofia examine a leaf with intense concentration. "She really looks at things, doesn't she?" It was a small moment, but it represented something significant. Patricia was finally seeing Sofia as an individual rather than as a comparison point to Aiden. The viral video had given me a platform to speak my truth, but more importantly, it had created space for a new kind of relationship to develop between Patricia and her granddaughter. The journey toward that relationship would be gradual and imperfect, marked by setbacks and small victories in equal measure. But for the first time since Sofia's birth, I felt optimistic that my daughter might eventually have a grandmother who truly saw and celebrated her, rather than one who merely tolerated her existence while waiting for more interesting grandchildren to demand her attention. The shift in our family dynamic became apparent during Memorial Day weekend, exactly 3 weeks after the video exploded across social media. Marcus called Daniel on Friday evening with an invitation that felt loaded with unspoken tension. He wanted to host a family barbecue at his Paradise Valley home, something he did annually but had somehow forgotten to mention to us until the last minute. Jessica would be making her famous potato salad, Patricia would bring dessert, and he hoped we could join them with Sofia for what he described as a chance to move forward as a family. The invitation felt like a test wrapped in social pleasantries. After weeks of Patricia's silence and the public scrutiny surrounding our family's internal dynamics, this barbecue represented either genuine reconciliation or an elaborate performance designed to demonstrate that everything was returning to normal. Daniel and I spent Friday night debating whether to accept, weighing our desire for family harmony against our hard-won understanding that some peace comes at too high a price. She's probably hoping that if we all act normal for an afternoon, people will forget about the video. Daniel said as we sat on our small balcony after putting Sofia to bed. Like if we show up and smile and pretend everything's fine, it proves she's not actually the kind of grandmother who dismisses her grandchildren's milestones. I understood his cynicism, but part of me wanted to believe that Patricia's park visit with Sofia had represented genuine intention to change rather than damage control. The woman who'd watched our daughter explore playground equipment with careful attention had seemed different from the one who'd responded to Sofia's first word with dismissive indifference. Whether that difference was permanent or performative remained unclear. We decided to attend but with explicit boundaries. We would stay for 2 hours maximum, leave immediately if Patricia reverted to treating Sofia as secondary to Aiden, and refuse to participate in any conversation that positioned the viral video as a misunderstanding rather than a legitimate response to months of problematic behavior. If Marcus wanted to move forward as a family, it would have to be based on acknowledgement of what had actually happened rather than collective amnesia about Patricia's treatment of our daughter. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of oppressive heat that makes Phoenix summers legendary. We dressed Sofia in a light cotton dress that my mother had sent, something cheerful and comfortable that would photograph well if anyone decided to document this supposed family reunion. I found myself thinking strategically about appearances in ways that felt foreign and uncomfortable, but the viral video had taught me that private family moments could become public property faster than I'd ever imagined. The drive to Paradise Valley took us through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, past manicured golf courses and gated communities that represented the lifestyle Patricia preferred her family to embody. Marcus and Jessica's house sat on a corner lot with professional landscaping and a 3-car garage, the kind of property that signaled success in ways Patricia understood and appreciated. Our modest Tempe apartment could fit inside their living room, a fact Patricia had never explicitly mentioned but that colored every family gathering with unspoken comparison. Marcus answered the door with the kind of forced enthusiasm that suggested he'd been coached on proper reception techniques. He hugged Daniel with extra duration, complimented Sofia's dress with deliberate attention, and asked about our drive with the care of someone following a script designed to demonstrate familial warmth. The performance felt awkward but well-intentioned, as if he genuinely wanted to repair relationships but wasn't sure how to navigate the complexity of what the viral video had revealed. Jessica appeared from the kitchen carrying Aiden, who at 14 months was walking confidently and chattering in the mixed language of toddlers everywhere. She greeted us with more genuine warmth than Marcus had managed, asking about Sofia's latest developments and seeming genuinely interested in the answers. Her comfort with the situation suggested either better acting skills or less personal investment in Patricia's reputation management efforts. Patricia emerged from the patio doors as we settled into the spacious living room, and the change in her demeanor was immediately apparent. Gone was the defensive anger from our phone conversation and the awkward uncertainty from the park meeting. Instead, she projected the confident hospitality she'd always displayed during family gatherings, moving through social interactions with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to being the matriarch of successful family events. "Emma, you look lovely," she said, embracing me with what felt like genuine warmth. "And Sofia is getting so big, look at how she's taking in everything around her." The comment about Sofia's curiosity echoed her observation from the park, suggesting that our playground meeting had made a lasting impression. Patricia knelt to Sofia's level and offered her a colorful toy, engaging with deliberate attention that felt both calculated and sincere. She was trying even if that effort was motivated by public embarrassment rather than private reflection. The afternoon unfolded with careful choreography that everyone seemed to understand without discussion. Patricia divided her attention between both grandchildren with obvious intention, commenting on Sofia's motor skills development and asking informed questions about her sleep schedule and feeding routine. When Aiden performed his latest tricks walking backwards and singing fragments of nursery rhymes, Patricia responded with appropriate enthusiasm, but made sure to also celebrate Sofia's attempts to climb onto the couch and her expanding vocabulary. The performance was exhausting to watch because it highlighted how easily Patricia could have been treating Sofia fairly all along. Every moment of genuine engagement with our daughter demonstrated that her previous dismissiveness had been a choice, rather than an inability. She was perfectly capable of showing interest in Sofia's development, asking meaningful questions about her progress, and celebrating her achievements with authentic enthusiasm. She simply hadn't chosen to do so until public opinion forced her hand. Daniel and I exchanged glances throughout the afternoon, both recognizing the surreal nature of watching his mother enthusiastically grandmother our child for what felt like the first time. The behavior was welcome but felt fragile, dependent on continued public scrutiny rather than intrinsic motivation. We were witnessing damage control disguised as family bonding, effective in the moment but questionable in its sustainability. The turning point came when Jessica suggested taking photos of all the grandchildren together for Patricia's social media accounts. It was a reasonable request in theory, the kind of documentation that normally happens at family gatherings without much thought. But in the context of everything that had happened over the past month, the photo session felt like evidence collection for Patricia's rehabilitation campaign. I want to post something showing how much I love spending time with both my grandchildren, Patricia explained as she positioned Sofia and Aiden on a blanket under the pergola. People have gotten the wrong impression about our family, and I think it's important to set the record straight. The statement revealed everything wrong with Patricia's approach to addressing the situation. Rather than acknowledging that people had gotten the right impression about her behavior and that she was working to change it, she was positioning the viral video and its aftermath as a public relations problem that required correction through better optics. Patricia, I said, keeping my voice level despite the frustration building in my chest, people didn't get the wrong impression. They saw exactly what happened. You dismissed Sofia's first word, and thousands of parents recognized that as problematic behavior because it was problematic behavior. The backyard fell silent except for the children's babbling and the distant hum of air conditioning units working against the desert heat. Marcus looked uncomfortable, Jessica busied herself arranging toys, and Daniel moved closer to me in a gesture of support that felt automatic and appreciated. Patricia's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. I've been trying all afternoon to show that I care about Sofia. I've been engaging with her, asking about her development, treating both children equally. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted that 8 months ago, I replied. I wanted it when Sofia was born, when she started crawling, when she said her first word. I wanted it before you were embarrassed into pretending to care, because millions of people saw how you actually treated her. The confrontation had arrived despite everyone's careful efforts to avoid it. All the choreographed family bonding and deliberate attention to both grandchildren couldn't erase the fundamental issue that Patricia was performing grandmother behavior rather than genuinely transforming her approach to our family. Marcus attempted to mediate with the kind of diplomatic language he probably used in real estate negotiations. Maybe we can focus on moving forward, rather than relitigating what happened in the past. Mom is here, she's trying, and Sofia is benefiting from her attention. But Daniel surprised everyone, including me, with the firmness of his response. The past matters because it shows us what Mom's real feelings are when she thinks no one important is watching. She's not here because she realized she was wrong. She's here because she got caught being wrong in public. The statement hung in the air like humidity, impossible to ignore and uncomfortable for everyone to acknowledge. Daniel had spent years avoiding direct confrontation with his mother, making excuses for her favoritism, and trying to maintain family peace at the expense of addressing obvious problems. The viral video had given him permission to speak truth he'd been suppressing for decades. Patricia's response revealed the depth of her resistance to genuine accountability. Instead of acknowledging the validity of our concerns, or expressing authentic remorse for her treatment of Sofia, she pivoted to her own victimization. I've been humiliated publicly because of that video. I've had friends calling me, neighbors asking questions, people treating me like I'm some kind of monster. I came here today to try to rebuild our relationship, and you're still attacking me. The word choice was telling. Patricia viewed our request for equal treatment of both grandchildren as an attack rather than a reasonable boundary. She saw the natural consequences of her own behavior as persecution rather than accountability. Most revealing of all, she framed the afternoon's performative attention to Sofia as magnanimous gesture rather than basic grandmother behavior she should have been demonstrating all along. Nobody attacked you, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We shared what actually happened, and people responded to seeing a grandmother dismiss her granddaughter's first word. That response wasn't about me, or Daniel, or even Sofia specifically. It was about recognizing behavior that hurts children, behavior that thousands of other parents have experienced with their own family members. The conversation was heading toward territory that would make continued family relationships difficult if not impossible. I could see the calculation in Patricia's eyes as she weighed her options: continue defending her previous behavior and risk permanent estrangement, or find some way to acknowledge wrongdoing without admitting to the full extent of what she'd been doing for months. Jessica intervened with the diplomatic skills that had probably helped her navigate Patricia's complex personality for years. Maybe we could talk about specific ways to make sure both kids feel equally valued going forward, rather than debating what happened before. It was a reasonable suggestion that offered Patricia a face-saving way to commit to behavioral change without requiring explicit admission of past mistakes. The approach felt unsatisfying because it avoided accountability, but it also created space for concrete improvements in Sofia's treatment that might be more valuable than forced apologies. Patricia seized the offered escape route with visible relief. I think that's a constructive approach. I want both grandchildren to feel loved and supported, and if I need to be more intentional about demonstrating that, I'm willing to learn. The language was careful and conditional, stopping short of acknowledging that she'd been intentionally demonstrating the opposite for months. But it represented more accountability than we'd received from her previously, and it created framework for monitoring future behavior rather than relitigating past grievances. The remainder of the barbecue proceeded with forced normalcy, as everyone worked to rebuild social equilibrium after the confrontation. Patricia continued her attentive engagement with Sofia, but without the performative quality that had characterized the earlier part of the afternoon. She seemed to understand that we were watching her behavior with new scrutiny, evaluating whether her promises of intentional equal treatment would translate into consistent action. As we prepared to leave, Patricia made a gesture that felt genuinely spontaneous rather than calculated. She asked if she could keep Sofia for a few hours the following week, while Daniel and I had dinner together, something she'd never offered before, despite regularly babysitting Aiden. The request represented practical recognition that equal treatment required equal investment of time and attention. I'd like to learn more about her routine and preferences, Patricia said, as she handed Sofia back to me. I realize I don't know her as well as I should, and I'd like to change that. The admission was small but significant, the first time Patricia had explicitly acknowledged that her relationship with Sofia was underdeveloped by choice, rather than circumstance. She was offering not just babysitting services, but genuine effort to build the kind of individual relationship with our daughter that she'd always maintained with Aiden. The drive home was quiet as Daniel and I processed the complexity of the afternoon. The barbecue had achieved its stated goal of bringing the family together, but it had also clarified that Patricia's transformation would be gradual and imperfect, motivated more by external pressure than internal reflection. We were entering a period of cautious optimism, tempered by realistic expectations about sustainable change. Do you think she'll actually follow through on babysitting Sofia? Daniel asked as we pulled into our apartment complex. I think she'll try, I replied. Whether she can sustain it long enough for it to become natural instead of effortful remains to be seen. That evening, as I scrolled through the hundreds of new comments on the viral video, I noticed a shift in the conversation. People were asking for updates about our family situation, wanting to know whether the public attention had led to positive changes in Patricia's behavior. The investment strangers felt in Sofia's well-being was both touching and overwhelming, a reminder that our personal family drama had become a symbol of broader struggles with difficult relatives and generational boundaries. I found myself wondering whether Patricia's attempted transformation would have happened without the viral video forcing public scrutiny of her behavior. The question was impossible to answer, but it highlighted how social media had created accountability mechanisms that didn't exist in previous generations. Patricia couldn't dismiss Sofia's milestones in private anymore, because privacy itself had become negotiable in ways that forced transparency about family dynamics. The most encouraging development was Sofia's obliviousness to the adult tensions surrounding her. She'd spent the afternoon exploring Marcus and Jessica's house with her usual curiosity, interacting with both adults and her cousin with the uncomplicated joy that characterized her approach to most new experiences. Whatever damage Patricia's favoritism might have caused was still reversible if the equal treatment continued consistently over time. As I put Sofia to bed that night, she babbled contentedly about her day, practicing new sounds and combinations that suggested more words were forming in her developing mind. Her first word had accidentally become a catalyst for family transformation, but her continued development would depend on sustained changes in behavior rather than temporary performances designed to manage public perception. The viral video had opened a door to different family dynamics, but walking through that door would require ongoing vigilance and continued willingness to prioritize Sofia's well-being over family harmony. The barbecue had been a promising first step, but the real test would come in the quiet moments when no cameras were rolling and no audiences were watching. 3 days later, Patricia called to confirm the babysitting arrangement, asking detailed questions about Sofia's naptime routine and favorite activities. The conversation felt different from any we'd had previously, focused on practical caregiving rather than social pleasantries. She was preparing to spend individual time with our daughter in ways that suggested genuine intention to build their relationship. The transformation wasn't complete, and it might never be. Patricia's motivation remained mixed between authentic desire for connection and damage control for her public reputation. But for the first time since Sofia's birth, I felt optimistic that my daughter might eventually have a grandmother who truly saw and celebrated her individual worth, rather than measuring her against impossible standards or treating her as an obligation rather than a gift. The viral video had taught me that sometimes private injustices need public witnesses to create change. It had also shown me that speaking truth about family dysfunction could open space for healing, even when that healing was imperfect and incomplete. Most importantly, it had demonstrated that advocating for my child's dignity was worth temporary discomfort and permanent alterations to family relationships that had never been serving her best interests anyway. Patricia arrived at our apartment the following Tuesday, with a canvas bag full of age-appropriate toys and a notebook where she'd written down questions about Sofia's schedule. The preparation felt unprecedented, a level of intentionality she'd never applied to spending time with our daughter. She moved through our small living space with careful attention, noting where Sofia's favorite books were kept, asking about her preferred snacks, and observing how we transitioned between activities throughout the day. Watching Patricia genuinely engage with the details of Sofia's routine felt surreal after months of dismissive disinterest. She asked about naptime rituals, learned the songs Sofia enjoyed during diaper changes, and practiced the specific way we helped her drink from her sippy cup. The effort was obvious and appreciated, though it highlighted how much foundational grandmother knowledge she'd missed by choosing not to invest in their relationship from the beginning. Sofia responded to her grandmother's focused attention with cautious curiosity. She'd grown accustomed to Patricia's peripheral presence at family gatherings, but had never experienced this kind of concentrated engagement. As Patricia settled onto the floor to play with blocks, Sofia studied her face with the serious consideration she applied to all new experiences, gradually warming to this unfamiliar version of her grandmother. Daniel and I left for dinner with mixed emotions, grateful for the gesture, but anxious about how the evening would unfold. This was Patricia's first time alone with Sofia for
more than a few minutes, and the success or failure of the experience would indicate whether her transformation had substance or was merely performance art designed to rehabilitate her public image. The restaurant we chose was small and quiet, the kind of place where we could talk without background noise interfering with conversation. We'd been so focused on managing family crisis and viral video aftermath that we'd barely had time to process the experience as a couple. The evening represented our first opportunity to reflect on how dramatically our lives had changed since that Thursday afternoon when Sofia said her first word. I keep thinking about how different tonight feels from other times we've left Sofia with family, Daniel said as we waited for our food to arrive. Usually it's my mom doing us a favor by watching her for a few hours. Tonight it feels like she's trying to earn something she should have had all along. The observation captured something important about the shift in family dynamics. Patricia's babysitting offer wasn't casual grandmother behavior but rather compensatory action designed to address months of neglect. She was attempting to build relationship foundation that should have been developing naturally since Sofia's birth, working to know her granddaughter as an individual rather than a comparison point to Aiden. Our conversation inevitably turned to the viral video and its ongoing impact on our daily lives. The view count had stabilized at around 8 million, but the responses continued evolving as the video reached new audiences across different platforms. Parent bloggers were using it as a case study in family boundary setting, social media managers were analyzing its viral mechanics, and family therapists were citing it in discussions about intergenerational conflict. The attention remained simultaneously validating and overwhelming. Each day brought new interview requests, collaboration opportunities, and messages from strangers sharing their own experiences with difficult in-laws. Some responses were critical, accusing me of publicly humiliating an elderly woman over a misunderstood text message. Others were supportive to the point of uncomfortable intensity, treating Patricia as a villain and me as a heroic figure in ways that felt reductive of the complex reality. "Do you think we'll ever be able to have normal family relationships again?" Daniel asked, voicing the concern that had been underlying all our recent interactions. "Or will everything always be filtered through the lens of that video and what it represented?" The question was impossible to answer definitively, but I'd been thinking about it constantly.
The viral video had fundamentally altered our family's power structure, forcing conversations that might never have happened and creating accountability mechanisms that didn't exist before. Whether those changes would lead to sustainably healthier relationships or permanent awkwardness remained to be seen. What felt certain was that we could never return to the previous dynamic where Patricia's favoritism was acknowledged privately but tolerated publicly. The video had made her behavior visible to the outside world in ways that created ongoing scrutiny of her treatment of both grandchildren. She was performing equality for now, but whether that performance would eventually become authentic remained the crucial question. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia as we finished dinner. The message was longer than any she'd ever sent me, describing Sofia's evening in detail with obvious pride and affection. She'd taken photos of Sofia reading books, playing with puzzles, and eating her bedtime snack. The documentation felt genuine rather than performative, capturing moments of connection rather than posed interactions designed for social media. "She's such a thoughtful little person," Patricia had written. "She spent 20 minutes examining a picture book, pointing at different objects and saying words I didn't know she knew. I had no idea how much she was taking in and processing. She's really remarkable." The message represented a breakthrough in Patricia's perception of Sofia as an individual. For the first time, she was describing our daughter with the kind of specific, admiring detail she'd always applied to Aiden's development. She was seeing Sofia's unique personality and cognitive development rather than measuring her against external standards or dismissing her achievements as unremarkable. When we returned home, Patricia was sitting on the couch with Sofia in her lap, reading a book together with patient attention. The scene felt natural in ways their previous interactions never had, suggesting that sustained one-on-one time had allowed authentic connection to develop between them. Sofia was leaning comfortably against her grandmother, babbling responses to the story and pointing at illustrations with confident engagement. "She's wonderful company," Patricia said as she transferred Sofia back to my arms. "I hadn't realized how much personality she has, how observant she is about everything around her. I feel like I've been missing out on knowing her as a person rather than just seeing her as a baby." The admission was more honest than anything Patricia had said about her relationship with Sofia previously. She was acknowledging not just that she'd been distant, but that her distance had prevented her from recognizing Sofia's individual worth and developing character. The evening had apparently provided revelation about what she'd been missing through her deliberate disengagement. As Patricia prepared to leave, she made a request that surprised both Daniel and me. "Would it be possible for me to do this regularly? Maybe once a week? I'd like to build on what we started tonight, get to know Sofia better, be the kind of grandmother she deserves." The request represented commitment beyond damage control. Rather than viewing the babysitting as a one-time gesture to demonstrate her rehabilitation, Patricia was proposing ongoing investment in their relationship. She was offering to prioritize Sofia's individual needs and development in ways she'd never done before. Over the following weeks, Patricia's transformation continued with encouraging consistency. She babysat Sofia every Tuesday evening, gradually extending their time together as both became more comfortable with their developing relationship. She started bringing books specifically chosen for Sofia's interests, toys selected based on her developmental stage, and snacks she'd researched to ensure they met her nutritional needs. The effort extended beyond their individual time together. At family gatherings, Patricia made obvious attempts to balance her attention between both grandchildren, commenting on Sofia's achievements with equal enthusiasm to Aiden's accomplishments. She started asking Daniel and me specific questions about Sofia's development, requesting photos and videos of milestones she'd previously ignored. Most significantly, Patricia began posting about both grandchildren on her social media accounts with equal frequency and enthusiasm. Her captions about Sofia demonstrated genuine knowledge of her personality and interests rather than generic grandmother sentiments. She shared videos of Sofia's expanding vocabulary, photos of their reading sessions, and stories about discoveries they'd made together during their weekly visits. The change wasn't lost on extended family and friends, many of whom commented on Patricia's obvious affection for Sofia and their developing bond. Several people mentioned being surprised by how much Sofia's personality shone through in recent photos, suggesting that Patricia's previous documentation had failed to capture her granddaughter's individual character. The viral video continued circulating throughout the summer, periodically resurging on different platforms as new audiences discovered it. Each wave of attention brought fresh perspectives on family dynamics, grandparent relationships, and the role of social media in addressing private conflicts. The conversation had evolved beyond our specific situation to broader discussions about favoritism, boundary setting, and child advocacy. I received regular updates from other parents who'd been inspired to address similar situations in their own families. Some had confronted relatives about unequal treatment of their children, others had established clearer boundaries around family interactions, and several had found the courage to prioritize their children's well-being over family harmony. The ripple effects of speaking truth about Patricia's behavior had encouraged others to examine and address their own difficult family dynamics. The most meaningful development was Sofia's obvious comfort with her grandmother's increased presence in her life. Their Tuesday evening routine had become something Sofia anticipated with excitement, pointing toward the door when Patricia's arrival time approached and babbling enthusiastically during their activities together. The authentic connection they'd developed validated all the difficult conversations and public scrutiny that had preceded it. By autumn, Sofia was walking confidently and speaking in short sentences that delighted everyone around her. Patricia documented these milestones with the same attention she'd always given to Aiden's development, sharing videos and photos with genuine pride rather than obligatory acknowledgement. The equal treatment felt increasingly natural rather than effortful, suggesting that her behavioral changes were becoming integrated rather than remaining surface-level performance. The family dynamics had stabilized into a new normal that felt healthier for everyone involved. Patricia continued investing equally in both grandchildren. Marcus and Jessica seemed relieved that family tensions had resolved, and Daniel and I no longer felt defensive about advocating for Sofia's equal treatment. The confrontation had been painful but ultimately productive, creating space for relationships based on authentic care rather than social obligation. Looking back on the viral video experience, I felt grateful for the unexpected platform it had provided to address issues that might never have been resolved through private conversation alone. The public response had given me confidence that my concerns were valid and my advocacy was necessary. More importantly, it had forced Patricia to confront the impact of her behavior in ways that led to genuine transformation rather than continued denial. The video had also connected me with thousands of other parents navigating similar challenges with difficult relatives. The shared experiences and mutual support had reduced the isolation that often accompanies family conflict, providing validation and practical strategies for protecting children from harmful family dynamics. Sofia's first word had become more than a developmental milestone. It had become the catalyst for family transformation, the moment when years of accumulated hurt finally found voice and demanded change. The journey from that dismissive text message to Patricia's current investment in her granddaughter had been challenging and public in ways I'd never anticipated, but it had ultimately created the kind of family relationships I'd always hoped Sofia would experience. As I watched Sofia and Patricia play together during their most recent visit, I marveled at how much had changed since that Thursday afternoon in May. The grandmother who'd once dismissed Sofia's achievements with casual indifference was now her enthusiastic advocate, documenting her development with pride and celebrating her unique personality with genuine affection. The transformation hadn't erased the months of favoritism and neglect that had preceded it, but it had created foundation for healthy relationships moving forward. Sofia would grow up knowing that her grandmother valued her individual worth, celebrated her achievements, and invested in their relationship with intentional care. She would never experience the casual dismissal that had characterized Patricia's early approach to their relationship. The viral video had taught me that sometimes private injustices require public witnesses to catalyze change. It had shown me that speaking difficult truths about family dysfunction could create space for healing, even when that healing required uncomfortable confrontations and permanent alterations to establish dynamics. Most importantly, it had demonstrated that advocating for my child's dignity was worth the temporary chaos and lasting changes to relationships that had never been serving her best interests. Sofia's first word had launched a journey none of us could have anticipated, transforming family relationships through the unexpected power of social media accountability. The experience had been challenging, enlightening, and ultimately redemptive, proving that authentic change was possible even in the most entrenched family dynamics when behavior was no longer allowed to hide behind closed doors. The phone call came on a crisp October morning, exactly 5 months after Sofia's first word had inadvertently launched our family into viral internet fame. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end belonged to someone whose name I recognized from entertainment news segments and morning television shows. Rachel Martinez from Good Morning Phoenix wanted to interview us for what she described as a Where Are They Now segment about viral stories that had sparked meaningful conversations about family relationships. The invitation felt both flattering and exhausting. We declined most interview requests over the summer, preferring to focus on the actual work of rebuilding family dynamics, rather than continuing to discuss them publicly. But something about Rachel's approach seemed different. She wasn't interested in sensationalizing our conflict or creating dramatic television moments. Instead, she wanted to explore how social media accountability had translated into real-world change, whether viral fame could actually improve family relationships, and what lessons other families might draw from our experience. Daniel and I spent several evenings debating whether to accept. The viral video had already accomplished its primary purpose of forcing Patricia to confront her treatment of Sofia. Our family relationships had stabilized into healthier patterns, and Sofia was thriving in her newfound equal status within the extended family structure. Did we really need to revisit the original conflict publicly, or would doing so risk destabilizing the progress we'd made? The deciding factor came from an unexpected source. Patricia herself encouraged us to do the interview, arguing that sharing our family's transformation might help other people navigate similar situations. She'd been reading comments on the original video regularly, she told us, and was struck by how many parents felt helpless in the face of relatives who played obvious favorites with their children. Maybe if people see that change is actually possible, they'll find the courage to address their own difficult family situations. Patricia said during one of her Tuesday evening visits with Sofia. I'm not proud of how I treated Sofia initially, but I am proud of how our relationship has developed. If sharing that helps even one family, it might be worth the discomfort of discussing my mistakes publicly. Her willingness to acknowledge her previous behavior on television represented growth that extended far beyond her relationship with Sofia. The Patricia who'd hung up on us in anger after the video first went viral would never have volunteered for additional public scrutiny. The woman sitting in our living room, building puzzles with her granddaughter while discussing the value of vulnerable honesty, had transformed in ways that continued to surprise everyone who knew her. We agreed to the interview with conditions. We wanted to include Sofia in age-appropriate ways that showed her current relationship with Patricia without exploiting her for entertainment value. We insisted on editorial input to ensure the segment focused on family growth rather than perpetuating drama. Most importantly, we required that the story emphasize positive outcomes, rather than dwelling on past conflicts that had already been resolved. Rachel proved remarkably accommodating to our requests, explaining that she'd been following our story since the original video, and was genuinely interested in documenting successful family reconciliation. She'd interviewed family therapists about the dynamics we'd experienced, researched other viral stories with similar themes, and approached our situation as a case study in conflict resolution rather than entertainment content. The interview took place in our apartment on a Thursday afternoon, with Sofia playing quietly nearby while we talked. Rachel's questions were thoughtful and well-researched, focusing on the practical aspects of rebuilding trust after public family conflict rather than rehashing the original grievances. She asked about specific strategies we'd use to move forward, challenges we'd encountered during the reconciliation process, and advice we might offer other families dealing with similar favoritism issues. Patricia arrived midway through the filming, having agreed to participate despite obvious nervousness about discussing her transformation publicly. Her portion of the interview was remarkably candid, acknowledging her previous favoritism without making excuses, and describing the personal growth that had resulted from being forced to confront her behavior. I didn't realize how much I was hurting Sofia by treating her differently than Aiden, Patricia said. Her voice steady despite the emotional weight of the admission. It took seeing thousands of strangers react with outrage to my dismissiveness to understand that my behavior was genuinely harmful rather than just different parenting styles or family dynamics. Rachel asked Patricia about the specific changes she'd made in her approach to both grandchildren, and her answers demonstrated impressive self-awareness about her previous mistakes. She described learning Sofia's individual preferences and personality traits, developing their weekly tradition of one-on-one time, and making conscious efforts to celebrate her achievements with equal enthusiasm to Aiden's accomplishments. The most powerful moment in the interview came when Rachel asked Sofia to show how she could say various words, including light, her famous first word, that had started everything. Sofia performed enthusiastically, clearly comfortable with the attention and proud of her expanding vocabulary. When she said light and pointed toward the window, Patricia spontaneously clapped and said, "That's my smart granddaughter," with obvious pride and affection. The genuine warmth between them was unmistakable, representing transformation that extended far beyond damage control or public relations management. Their connection had developed into authentic relationship built on mutual affection and shared activities rather than obligatory family interaction. Sofia clearly adored her grandmother's focused attention, and Patricia genuinely enjoyed discovering her granddaughter's unique personality and cognitive development. Rachel concluded the interview by asking what advice we'd give to other families experiencing similar favoritism or dismissive behavior from relatives. Our responses had been shaped by months of reflection about what had worked in our situation and what we might have done differently. Document everything, I said. Not necessarily for social media, but for your own clarity about what's actually happening. It's easy to gaslight yourself into thinking you're being too sensitive when family members dismiss your concerns about unequal treatment. Having concrete examples helps you trust your own perceptions. Daniel's advice focused on the importance of unified spousal support when confronting difficult family members. Emma couldn't have addressed this alone, he said. It took both of us being willing to prioritize Sofia's well-being over family harmony, even when that meant uncomfortable confrontations with my mother. Patricia's contribution surprised everyone with its directness. Listen to the feedback, even when it's painful, she said. I spent weeks being angry about the video, and the responses it generated instead of actually hearing what people were telling me about my behavior. The sooner I stopped defending myself and started listening, the sooner I could begin changing. The segment aired 3 weeks later during a morning show feature about viral stories with positive outcomes. Rachel had edited it skillfully, showing our family's journey from conflict to reconciliation without sensationalizing the original drama. The focus remained on growth and healing rather than entertainment value, presenting our experience as a case study in successful family transformation. The response to the follow-up story was overwhelmingly positive, with viewers expressing appreciation for seeing resolution rather than continued conflict. Many commented that Patricia's willingness to acknowledge her mistakes and demonstrate genuine change had restored their faith in people's capacity for growth. Others shared their own experiences with family favoritism and described feeling inspired to address similar issues in their own relationships. The most meaningful responses came from grandparents who recognized their own behavior in Patricia's original treatment of Sofia. Several wrote lengthy comments describing how the video had prompted self-reflection about their relationships with different grandchildren, leading to conscious efforts to ensure equal treatment and individual connection with each child. One grandmother from Colorado wrote, I realized I was doing exactly what Patricia did with my daughter-in-law's children versus my son's children. I'd been justifying it as natural preference. But seeing the hurt it caused made me understand that children don't deserve different levels of love based on which parent they belong to. I've been working to build individual relationships with all my grandchildren, and it's been incredibly rewarding. The ongoing impact of our story extended beyond individual family transformations. Family therapists began using the video as a teaching tool in workshops about intergenerational boundaries and favoritism. Parenting organizations referenced our experience in discussions about advocating for children within extended family systems. Social media platforms highlighted our story as an example of how viral content could facilitate positive real-world change, rather than just generating temporary entertainment. The attention had unexpected professional benefits as well. My background as a speech therapist combined with the platform the viral video had provided led to speaking opportunities at parenting conferences and family therapy training programs. I found myself regularly invited to discuss strategies for addressing family favoritism, setting boundaries with difficult relatives, and using social media accountability to facilitate difficult conversations. Daniel received similar opportunities within educational circles, where our story resonated with teachers who regularly observed family dynamics affecting their students. He began presenting workshops about recognizing favoritism in families and supporting children who experienced unequal treatment from extended family members. The speaking engagements felt meaningful because they extended the conversation beyond our individual experience to broader systemic issues affecting many families. We weren't just sharing our story for entertainment value, but contributing to professional development and family education in ways that might prevent other children from experiencing the dismissiveness Sofia had faced. As Sofia approached her second birthday, the contrast between her current relationship with Patricia and their early interactions felt stark and encouraging. Patricia had become genuinely invested in Sofia's development, celebrating each new word and skill with authentic enthusiasm. Their weekly visits had evolved into elaborate adventures, with Patricia planning activities specifically tailored to Sofia's interests and developmental stage. The transformation extended to family gatherings, where Patricia's attention to both grandchildren felt natural rather than performed. She'd developed individual traditions with each child, acknowledging their different personalities and preferences while ensuring equal investment in their relationships. Aiden and Sofia both clearly viewed their grandmother as a source of special attention and affection, rather than as someone who favored one over the other. The most significant change was in Sofia's confidence and security within the family structure. She approached family events with enthusiasm, rather than the tentative uncertainty that had characterized her early interactions with Patricia. She expected to be celebrated and included rather than overlooked or dismissed, reflecting the equal treatment she'd been receiving consistently for months. Our marriage had also strengthened through the process of addressing family conflict together. Daniel's willingness to confront his mother's favoritism, despite years of avoiding such confrontations, had demonstrated commitment to our nuclear family's well-being that deepened our partnership. We'd learned to prioritize our children's needs over extended family harmony when those values conflicted. The viral video experience had taught us valuable lessons about advocacy, boundary setting, and the power of speaking truth even when it's uncomfortable. We discovered that private suffering often continues until it becomes public accountability, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family relationships is to refuse to enable harmful behavior through silence. Looking back on the 5 months since Sophia's first word had inadvertently launched our family transformation, I felt grateful for the unexpected journey we'd traveled together. The viral fame had been overwhelming and often uncomfortable, but it had catalyzed changes that might never have occurred through private conversation alone. Sophia's second birthday party, celebrated in Marcus and Jessica's backyard with both sides of the family present, felt like a celebration of more than just her age. It represented successful family reconciliation, the power of speaking up for children who can't advocate for themselves, and the possibility of genuine change even in the most entrenched relationship patterns. Patricia spent the afternoon documenting Sophia's joy with the same attention she'd always given to Aiden's special moments, posting photos and videos that captured her granddaughter's personality with obvious pride and affection. The woman who'd once dismissed Sophia's first word with casual indifference was now her enthusiastic champion, celebrating every achievement and milestone with genuine investment. As the party wound down and guests began departing, Patricia lingered to help clean up, clearly reluctant to end her time with Sophia. Their goodbye hug lasted longer than necessary, with both of them seeming to treasure the connection they'd developed through months of intentional relationship building. "Thank you," Patricia said quietly as she prepared to leave, "for not giving up on the possibility that I could do better. For believing that people can change, even when they've made significant mistakes." The gratitude felt genuine and hard-earned, representing acknowledgement that our confrontation of her behavior had ultimately improved her life as well as Sophia's. She discovered the joy of authentic relationship with her granddaughter rather than continuing to miss out on Sophia's remarkable development and personality. The viral video had begun as documentation of a painful family moment, but it had evolved into a catalyst for transformation that benefited everyone involved. Sophia gained a grandmother who truly saw and celebrated her. Patricia discovered the rewards of genuine connection with both her grandchildren. Daniel learned to prioritize his nuclear family's needs over avoiding conflict, and I found my voice as an advocate for my child's dignity and worth. The experience had shown us that sometimes the most private family struggles need public witnesses to create lasting change, and that speaking difficult truths about harmful behavior can open space for healing that wouldn't otherwise be possible. Most importantly, it had demonstrated that children deserve adults who will advocate for their equal treatment, even when that advocacy requires uncomfortable conversations and permanent changes to established family dynamics. The anniversary of Sophia's first word arrived with an unexpected email from TikTok's corporate headquarters. They wanted to feature our story in their annual Voices That Matter campaign, highlighting how their platform had facilitated positive real-world change in families and communities. The invitation came with an offer to create a professionally produced mini-documentary about our journey, complete with expert interviews and follow-up stories from other families who'd been inspired by our experience. The proposal felt simultaneously honoring and surreal. A year ago, I'd been a frustrated mother posting a 30-second video about her mother-in-law's dismissive behavior. Now, one of the world's largest social media companies wanted to showcase our family's transformation as an example of their platform's potential for social good. The evolution from personal grievance to corporate case study highlighted how dramatically our lives had changed since that Thursday afternoon in May. Daniel and I spent weeks discussing whether to participate in the documentary project. We'd found peace in our family relationships and had largely stepped back from public attention about our story. Sophia was thriving in her secure relationship with Patricia, and we'd all settled into comfortable rhythms that didn't require external validation or documentation. Did we really want to revisit the original conflict and invite renewed scrutiny into our private lives? The decision ultimately came from an unexpected source. Letters we'd been receiving from families around the world who'd been inspired to address their own favoritism issues after seeing our story. The correspondence had never stopped even as the viral attention faded. Parents wrote about confronting grandparents who played obvious favorites. Adults described setting boundaries with relatives who dismissed their children, and even some grandparents shared stories about recognizing and changing their own problematic behaviors. One letter particularly moved us. A woman from Oregon wrote about her mother-in-law who'd been treating her adopted daughter differently than her biological grandchildren for over 5 years. After seeing our video and follow-up interviews, she'd finally found the courage to address the situation directly. The conversation had been difficult but ultimately productive, leading to genuine efforts at equal treatment and a much healthier family dynamic. "Your willingness to speak up gave me permission to speak up too," she wrote. "My daughter deserves a grandmother who celebrates her achievements without comparing them to her cousin's accomplishments. Thank you for showing me that protecting my child's dignity was worth the temporary discomfort of family confrontation." Reading dozens of similar letters convinced us that participating in the documentary might provide valuable service to other families struggling with similar issues. Our story had apparently given people language and courage to address situations they'd been enduring in silence, validating feelings they'd been told were oversensitive or unfounded. The documentary production began in early spring with extensive interviews conducted in our home and Patricia's house. The filmmakers approached the project with remarkable sensitivity, focusing on growth and healing rather than sensationalizing the original conflict. They interviewed family therapists about favoritism dynamics, social media experts about viral accountability, and other families who'd experienced similar transformations after confronting difficult relatives. Patricia's participation in the documentary represented continued growth in her willingness to acknowledge her past mistakes publicly. She spoke candidly about the thought patterns that had led to her differential treatment of her grandchildren, the denial she'd experienced when first confronted about her behavior, and the specific steps she'd taken to build authentic relationships with both Sofia and Aiden. "I convinced myself that my preference for Aiden was natural because I saw him more often and had been present for more of his milestones," Patricia said during her interview segment. "But that was circular reasoning. I saw him more because I chose to prioritize time with Marcus and Jessica's family. I was present for his milestones because I made effort to be there that I never made for Sofia." Her analysis demonstrated sophisticated understanding of how favoritism operates within family systems. She'd moved beyond simple acknowledgement of differential treatment to genuine insight about the choices and rationalizations that had perpetuated the problem. The personal work she'd done to understand her own behavior impressed even the family therapist consulting on the documentary. The filmmakers spent considerable time documenting Sofia's current relationship with Patricia, capturing their weekly visits and observing their natural interactions without manufactured drama or artificial moments. The footage showed genuine affection and connection, with Sofia clearly comfortable in her grandmother's presence, and Patricia obviously invested in her granddaughter's individual development. One particularly touching scene showed Patricia reading to Sofia from a book about different types of light sources, connecting to her granddaughter's first word in ways that felt meaningful rather than performative. Sofia listened with rapt attention, occasionally pointing at illustrations and practicing new vocabulary words with her grandmother's patient encouragement. The documentary also included interviews with me about the decision to post the original video and the unexpected journey that had followed. I found myself reflecting on how much had changed not just in our family relationships but in my own understanding of advocacy, boundaries, and the responsibility parents have to protect their children from harmful family dynamics. "I used to think that maintaining family peace was more important than addressing uncomfortable truths," I said during one interview segment. The viral video taught me that sometimes children need adults who are willing to disrupt that peace on their behalf, even when it's socially awkward or relationally difficult. Daniel's portions of the documentary focused on his experience as an adopted child navigating his mother's preferences and how becoming a father had changed his perspective on family loyalty versus child protection. His insights about generational patterns and the courage required to break cycles of harmful behavior added depth to the story beyond the immediate drama of viral social media attention. The documentary crew also interviewed Dr. Sarah Chen, a family therapist specializing in intergenerational relationships who provided expert context for our experience. She explained how favoritism damages both preferred and non-preferred children, discussed the role of social media in modern family accountability, and offered practical strategies for addressing similar situations. "What makes this story remarkable isn't the viral aspect," Dr. Chen observed. "It's the authentic transformation that occurred when destructive family patterns were exposed to external scrutiny. Many families struggle with favoritism, but few find ways to address it constructively rather than just enduring it indefinitely. The production process took several months, with filming concluding just before Sofia's second birthday. The timing felt symbolic, marking not just her developmental milestone, but also the completion of our family's journey from conflict to reconciliation under public observation. We'd opened our private struggles to external witnesses and had emerged with stronger, healthier relationships. The documentary premiered simultaneously on TikTok's platform and major streaming services, reaching audiences far beyond those who'd seen the original viral video. The professional production values and expert commentary elevated our story from social media drama to legitimate case study in family transformation, generating thoughtful discussion about favoritism, boundaries, and conflict resolution. The response exceeded everyone's expectations. Within the first week, the documentary had been viewed over 50 million times across all platforms. Comments poured in from viewers sharing their own experiences with difficult family members, expressing gratitude for seeing successful reconciliation, and describing how our story had inspired them to address their own challenging relationships. Mental health professionals began incorporating the documentary into training programs about family systems and intervention strategies. Parenting organizations used it as a discussion starter for workshops about advocating for children within extended family structures. Social media companies referenced it as an example of how their platforms could facilitate positive social change rather than just entertainment or commerce. The most significant impact, however, was on individual families who found courage to address their own favoritism issues after seeing our transformation. We received hundreds of messages from parents who'd confronted relatives about unequal treatment, grandparents who'd recognized and changed their own problematic behaviors, and adult children who'd finally set boundaries with family members who'd dismissed their concerns for years. A grandfather from Texas wrote about realizing he'd been unconsciously favoring his son's children over his daughter's children and making deliberate efforts to build individual relationships with all his grandchildren. A mother from New York described successfully addressing her mother-in-law's differential treatment of her children after years of feeling powerless to change the dynamic. These stories reinforced our decision to participate in the documentary despite the personal cost of continued public attention. Our willingness to share our journey had apparently provided templates and courage for other families to pursue their own healing, multiplying the positive impact far beyond our individual experience. The documentary's success led to unexpected opportunities for continued advocacy work. I was invited to speak at conferences about family dynamics, child protection, and social media's role in accountability. Daniel received requests to present workshops for educators about recognizing favoritism's impact on children and supporting families through difficult transitions. Most meaningfully, we were approached by organizations working to prevent family dysfunction and support healthy intergenerational relationships. Our story had become a case study not just in conflict resolution but in the courage required to prioritize children's well-being over family harmony when those values came into conflict. Patricia surprised everyone by accepting invitations to speak at grandparenting workshops about recognizing and changing favoritism behaviors. Her willingness to discuss her mistakes publicly and describe her transformation process provided powerful testimony about the possibility of genuine change even in entrenched relationship patterns. I hope other grandparents can learn from my experience without having to go through the embarrassment of being exposed on viral social media, she said during one presentation. The love I have for both my grandchildren now is so much richer than the limited relationship I had before. I was missing out on Sofia's remarkable personality and development because I was too focused on comparisons and preferences. Sofia's second birthday celebration that summer felt like a culmination of everything our family had experienced and learned over the previous year. The party was held in our apartment complex's community center, with both sides of the family present along with close friends who'd supported us through the viral experience and its aftermath. Patricia arrived early to help with setup, bringing a specially commissioned cake decorated with letters of the alphabet to honor Sofia's expanding vocabulary. She'd also prepared a photo album documenting Sofia's development over the past year, including pictures from their weekly visits and milestones she'd celebrated with increasing enthusiasm and investment. The party itself was joyful and relaxed, with Sofia clearly comfortable being the center of positive attention from all the adults in her life. She moved confidently between relatives, secure in her knowledge that everyone present was genuinely excited to celebrate her growth and development. When Sophia opened presents, Patricia's gift was particularly thoughtful, a collection of books about different careers and professions, chosen to encourage Sophia's curiosity about the world and her place in it. The selection reflected genuine knowledge of Sophia's interests and personality rather than generic toddler entertainment. I wanted to give her books that would help her imagine all the different things she might become, Patricia explained. She's such a bright, curious little girl, and I want her to know that her possibilities are limitless. The sentiment represented a complete transformation from the grandmother who'd once dismissed Sophia's first word as unworthy of attention. Patricia was now actively invested in nurturing her granddaughter's development and encouraging her potential rather than comparing her unfavorably to other children. As the party concluded and guests began departing, Sophia fell asleep in Patricia's arms while her grandmother read one of the new books aloud. The scene felt like a perfect symbol of how far their relationship had traveled from those early months of neglect and dismissal to genuine connection and mutual affection. The documentary continued generating discussion and inspiring family transformations throughout the summer and fall. Academic researchers began studying our story as an example of how social media accountability could facilitate positive behavioral change in ways that traditional intervention methods sometimes failed to achieve. The ongoing attention required careful balance between public advocacy and private family life. We'd learned to set boundaries around media requests and speaking engagements, ensuring that our continued platform work served genuine educational purposes rather than just perpetuating our own celebrity. Most importantly, we'd maintained focus on the core lesson that had emerged from our entire experience. Children deserve adults who will advocate for their equal treatment and individual worth, even when that advocacy requires uncomfortable confrontations with family members who prefer to maintain harmful status quo relationships. Looking back on the 2 years since Sophia's first word had accidentally launched our family into public prominence, I felt profound gratitude for the unexpected journey we traveled together. The viral video had been posted in a moment of hurt and frustration, but it had ultimately led to healing and growth that might never have occurred through private conversation alone. Sophia was thriving in her secure relationship with all her family members, confident in her equal status and individual worth. Patricia had discovered the joy of authentic grandparent relationships built on genuine connection rather than comparison or obligation. Daniel had learned to prioritize his nuclear family's needs over avoiding conflict with extended relatives. And I had found my voice as an advocate for my child's dignity and well-being. The experience had taught us that sometimes the most private family struggles need public witnesses to create lasting change, that speaking difficult truths about harmful behavior can open space for transformation that wouldn't otherwise be possible, and that protecting children's emotional safety is worth temporary discomfort and permanent alterations to dysfunctional family dynamics. Most significantly, our story had inspired hundreds of other families to address their own favoritism issues, multiplying the positive impact far beyond our individual experience. Sophia's first word had become a catalyst, not just for our family's transformation but for broader conversations about child advocacy, family boundaries, and the courage required to prioritize children's well-being over adult comfort and convenience. 3 years had passed since that fateful Thursday when Sophia spoke her first word, and the ripple effects of our viral moment had evolved into something neither Daniel nor I could have predicted. The initial storm of internet attention had settled into a steady stream of meaningful connections with families worldwide who continued reaching out about their own journeys toward healthier dynamics. What struck me most was how our story had become a touchstone for parents who'd never imagined they could successfully challenge entrenched family patterns. Sophia was now a confident 4-year-old with an impressive vocabulary and an infectious curiosity about everything around her. She spoke in complete sentences, asked thoughtful questions about the world, and had developed a particular fascination with how things worked. Her relationship with Patricia had evolved into something beautiful and natural, filled with inside jokes, shared adventures, and the kind of unconditional affection every child deserves from their grandparents. The transformation was most evident during our weekly family dinners, which had become a cherished tradition after the documentary's success. Patricia would arrive with carefully chosen activities tailored to both Sophia's and Aiden's interests, no longer struggling to balance her attention but flowing naturally between both grandchildren based on their individual needs and personalities. The effortful equality of those early months had given way to authentic connection that required no conscious management. Last month, Patricia surprised us all by announcing her decision to write a book about her experience. The project had emerged from her speaking engagements at grandparenting workshops, where she'd discovered that many older adults struggled with similar unconscious biases and favoritism patterns they'd never recognized or addressed. Her publisher believed her perspective as someone who genuinely transformed could provide hope and practical guidance for other grandparents willing to examine their own behaviors. "I want to spare other families the pain we went through," Patricia explained during one of our dinners. "If my willingness to be vulnerable about my mistakes can help even one grandmother recognize favoritism before it damages relationships, then all the embarrassment and growth will have been worth something bigger than just our family." Her commitment to public accountability continued to amaze me. The woman who'd once been furious about viral internet attention had become an advocate for transparency and difficult conversations within families. She'd scheduled interviews with parenting magazines, committed to a book tour for her upcoming memoir, and even started her own social media account focused on healthy grandparent relationships. Daniel's career had also been transformed by our experience. His insights about family dynamics and child advocacy had led to a position with the district's Family Liaison program, where he worked directly with parents and teachers to address home situations affecting students' well-being. Many of his cases involved grandparent favoritism or boundary issues similar to what we'd experienced, and his personal understanding of those dynamics made him uniquely effective at facilitating difficult conversations. "I see families struggling with the same patterns we lived through," he told me recently. "Parents who know something isn't right but don't trust their own perceptions, children who internalize unequal treatment as personal inadequacy, grandparents who genuinely love their grandchildren but express that love in ways that create hierarchy and competition." His work provided ongoing validation that our story had tapped into widespread family dynamics that many people experienced, but few knew how to address constructively. The viral video had given voice to frustrations that existed across cultural and economic boundaries, creating permission for conversations that might never have happened otherwise. My own advocacy work had expanded beyond speaking engagements to include consultation with family therapy practices and parenting organizations developing resources about intergenerational boundaries. The platform created by our viral moment had evolved into meaningful professional opportunities that felt aligned with our values rather than exploitative of our experience. The most rewarding aspect was hearing from families who'd successfully navigated their own favoritism challenges after being inspired by our story. A grandmother in Australia had recognized her differential treatment of step-grandchildren and worked to build authentic relationships with all the children in her extended family. Parents in Canada had confronted relatives about unequal gift-giving and established clear expectations for equal treatment during family gatherings. These success stories reinforced our belief that speaking up about uncomfortable family truths could create positive change rather than just causing permanent damage to relationships. The key seemed to be approaching these conversations with clear boundaries rather than demands for immediate transformation, creating space for growth while protecting children from continued harm. Sofia remained blissfully unaware of the broader significance of her first word, though she'd begun asking questions about why strangers sometimes recognized our family in public places. We developed age-appropriate ways to explain that we'd shared a story about family love that had helped other families talk about their own relationships more honestly. "Did my first word really help other babies?" she asked recently, demonstrating the kind of empathy and social awareness that made me incredibly proud. Her question sparked a conversation about how speaking up for fairness could help not just ourselves but other people facing similar challenges. The anniversary of the original video's posting had become an informal celebration in our house, not of viral fame, but of the courage it had taken to prioritize Sofia's well-being over family harmony. Each year we reflected on how much had changed and renewed our commitment to advocating for her continued equal treatment within all our family relationships. This year's anniversary brought an unexpected gift, a handwritten letter from a teenager in Ohio, whose grandmother had changed her favoritism patterns after seeing our documentary. The girl described growing up feeling secondary to her male cousins until her mother showed the grandmother our story and initiated difficult conversations about equal treatment. "I wanted to thank your family for speaking up," she wrote. "Because you were brave enough to share your story, my grandmother learned to see me as an individual instead of just comparing me to my cousins. Our relationship is completely different now, and I finally feel like I matter to her as much as they do." Reading her letter reminded me why we'd continued participating in interviews and advocacy work despite the personal cost of ongoing public attention. Sofia's accidental viral moment had created opportunities for family healing that extended far beyond our individual experience, touching lives we'd never meet in ways we might never fully understand. Patricia framed the teenager's letter and placed it in her kitchen where she could see it daily, a reminder of why her continued vulnerability about past mistakes served purposes bigger than personal redemption. Her transformation had become a beacon of hope for other grandparents willing to examine their own behaviors and make necessary changes. Looking toward the future, our family felt stable and secure in ways that hadn't seemed possible during those difficult early months of Sofia's life. The viral video had forced conversations that might never have happened through private channels alone, creating accountability that had ultimately strengthened rather than damaged our most important relationships. Sofia was thriving academically and socially, confident in her place within our extended family and secure in the knowledge that all the adults in her life valued her individual worth. Her vocabulary continued expanding, her curiosity about the world remained boundless, and her relationship with Patricia had become one of the most joyful aspects of her young life. The journey from that first dismissive text message to our current family harmony had taught us invaluable lessons about advocacy, courage, and the power of speaking truth even when it's uncomfortable. Most importantly, it had shown us that protecting children's emotional well-being sometimes requires adults to disrupt established patterns and demand better treatment, even when that disruption creates temporary chaos. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.